Tonight's show, we have National Geographic photographer Jason Edwards. And now for your host, KoolKard. Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen. This is the KoolKard Show. Kicking it with KoolKard. Tonight is episode 271 and counting, and I have another brilliant gentleman joining me on the show to give you the game. This is so near and dear to me because growing up in grade school, we used to get in the classroom. There was always like these children's versions, the children's version of National Geographic. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but there was a children's version of National Geographic. I guess it was like a shortened version of the big book, I guess. I don't know. But I used to love it. I used to love looking at the pictures. It would take me to a different place, right? I always had a colorful mind anyway, but it would take me to a different place in time, just looking at all the pictures, the wildlife, just the architecture around the world, the wonders of the world, all that good stuff. Well, tonight, I actually have an award-winning National Geographic photographer who goes by the name of Jason Edwards joining me on the show. Lord Jesus, I have so many questions. I can't wait to dive in. I am so intrigued. I'm pretty sure this is going to be really fascinating. So you guys stick around and just join us, man, and just take it in. Take it in. I know you love National Geographic. I know you love wildlife. I know you love I know somebody wants to travel around the world, right? Just go off the grid. Well, this guy, over 70 countries, right? 70 countries, 3 decades of work. Let's jump right in. I can't wait. Let's go. Let's kick it, y'all. Jason, welcome to the show.
Mate, how are you? Greetings from down under.
Yes, greetings from down under. Jason is joining us all the way from Melbourne, Australia. Okay, it's bright and sunny over there. It's a beautiful day, but he's probably running off of like 2 hours of sleep in the last 14 days. He just got back from where? Antarctica?
Antarctica, my friend. That's right. Did the long run back from the ice, sailed back from Antarctica back to Patagonia in South America, in Argentina, and then flew from Patagonia to Buenos Aires, and then Buenos Aires to Santiago in Chile, Santiago, Chile to Sydney, Sydney to Melbourne, and that is the face you get after doing that, after being on the ice for a number of weeks. So, yeah, good to be home. Very good to be home. Yeah.
Jesus Christ, that's a lot of wear and tear on your body, just the traveling alone.
Yeah, well, look, apparently I'm the record holder for international miles in economy in coach for Qantas, which is not necessarily a title that I want, but it's a title that I have. So,
oh my God! So you got a lot of sky miles, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I collate a few and then use them to sometimes put my family on planes and stuff so they can come into the field with me. But I'd much rather be, put it this way, man, you know what it's like when you get on a plane, you turn right to go to the bad seats, you turn left to go to the good seats. I'd much rather be turning left.
Oh my goodness.
But, look, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do? But check this out. Before we get started in our conversation, I like to pray. Everybody knows me. I like to pray before the conversation. Are you okay with that?
Good, man. Fire away.
All right, cool. Let's get it. Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, we just want to thank you for this time, for this moment in time. We want to thank you for Jason's availability. Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, we want to thank you for just bringing him back home to his family safely. Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, from in the field. Lord Jesus, we just thank you for this conversation that we're going to have. Lord Jesus, guide it and just lift us up. Allow Jason to enlighten people, Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, about his travels, his journeys, Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, and all his gifts to the world, Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, with his great photography and his skills and his gift that you have allotted him. Lord Jesus, we just want to thank you for life, love, happiness, just waking us up this morning, for the safety, Honey Lord Jesus, of ourselves, our family, Honey Lord Jesus, and loved ones. Lord Jesus, we want to give you all the victory, all the glory, all the love, all the praise. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So, everybody knows I like to humanize the conversation, right? We're going to talk about National Geographic. We're going to talk about all the work that you've done over the span of 3 decades, 70 countries. Jesus Christ, man, you've done a lot. But I want to get to know you, Jason Edwards, as the man we want to know. So can you give us a little backstory on how and like how you got started? Like, we need to know that so we can understand how you got to where you are right now, right? Like, where did it
Yeah.
all start? Did you always love photography, visual arts? Like, where'd that come from?
Yeah, it's a great place to start. Cool. So basically, I was one of these kids that was fascinated by wildlife and nature. A lot of kids are, but for me, it was a real passion. And I grew up. My parents' home, their first home that they bought, was the second home in the area that they developed. So it was
Mm.
full of snakes and lizards and frogs and turtles and all of these kinds of things. And so growing up, there was always animals in the house. I was always collecting things, tanks, aquariums, things like that. But importantly, my father was one of these long haul truck drivers, truckies we call them.
Mm-hmm.
So he'd find injured kangaroos or baby joeys, the small kangaroos, always bringing stuff home. So I never really knew a childhood or my teenage years without actually wildlife in the house. But creatively,
Wow.
you,
You
we've got
got
two puppies.
you got
I'll show you at some point.
them
It's,
puppies down there fighting and playing, huh?
yeah, literally, they're under my feet right now. So basically, when I grew up, one of the first letters that I ever wrote to Father Christmas was, "Can I have a book that shows every animal and the ecosystems that it lived in?" And I got Disney's Wonders of the World and McDonald's, Wildlife of the World, and it had all these painted dioramas.
Mm.
And for example, if it had the Amazon, it had an anaconda and a jaguar and a toucan and all of that stuff.
Right.
So I was fascinated by all these animals living together. Little did I realize that it would take me decades to realize that they might live in the same forest, but it's really hard to actually see them all. But what I did as a child, I was very heavily involved in drawing, even as a small child. So pencil drawing, illustration, surrealism, fantasy art, things like that. So right through my elementary school and my high school, that's what I did. I was fixated on that creative passion of mine. But for me, it was a little bit different to most people. I was focused on what didn't belong in my compositions rather than what did belong. So normally when people create, they're thinking, I want this to be here, I want this to be here. I came at it from the other end of the snake, as we'd say in Australia. We've got lots of snakes in Australia. You know, so for me, I was really fixated on that. And when I was 8, I borrowed my mum's camera. She had a little Kodak canister camera,
Mm.
and I took my first photos then. And ironically, my class was allowed on a school excursion onto the tarmac of Melbourne International Airport. Can you believe it? Letting 8-year-olds onto the tarmac. I mean, times have changed.
Right.
But, I took some photos looking up at one of the jets, and then they let us on the jumbo. And I took pictures out through the window and everything. Little did I realise that I'd end up spending thousands and thousands of hours looking out through one of those windows. But so for me, I moved through those years, those developmental years, drawing and eventually doing oil painting, and starting to take photos. But it was also maths and science. I was interested in biology, chemistry, physics, the maths and everything like that. So as much as I had this art stream going along here, I had this duality. I had this equal path of science and maths, and I think that in hindsight, we don't really know our path when we're on it, but I
Right.
think in hindsight that was what sort of led me to where I am now. And when I was 14 or 15, my grandmother went to Hong Kong just on a holiday. I had $250 that I'd saved from delivering newspapers, ride my bike, putting the
Yeah.
papers
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
And given that I was paid about $2.80 a week or something, it must have taken me years to get that
Jesus.
money together. And yeah, slave labor for sure. And so it's like I look back at it now, going, "What was I thinking?" But I'm sure there was some birthday money in there and stuff.
But you
But
learn
I
hustle
gave
out
my
of it.
yeah. I was out there scamming smaller kids in the playground. Moving the cup with the ball.
Right.
And so my gran went to Hong Kong. She came back with a film camera and a little lens and a flash. And I did like everyone does now. I started taking pictures of using my paper round money to buy film and negative film, and took pictures of my friends playing sports and everything. I went to a pretty good school, and I had pictures published, as a 15-year-old, in my school yearbook and our
Okay.
version of a school yearbook, I guess. And then I was hooked. It was like, oh my God, I want to see my work in print. I had this
Yeah.
epiphany. I want to make pictures for the rest of my life. So, I wanted to tell stories with photos, and seeing them on the printed page really, really did that for me. And then, of course, when I finished high school, I got a job as a zookeeper. So, but that, we can talk about that. But, those first 16, 17, 18 years for me was all about, I guess in hindsight, I was pretty focused as a child. The school I went to, and it doesn't
Sounds
mean
like it.
anything, if anything. Yeah, it was a very academically selective school. So for 154 years, they sit one entrance exam, and boys from around the world sit it. They take, about 200 boys, 180 boys. So
Right.
I was smarter when I was younger, and I'm pretty sure that wine and gin has dulled my intelligence since then. I've got to be honest with you. But back then I was a bright kid, and so I was very fortunate. Mum and Dad didn't have a lot of money, but the school supported me to be there, and I was in an environment where creatively people wanted to see me succeed, as well as learning about biology and the other sciences. I had that support network in my friends and in the school that encouraged me to take a different path than what most teenagers, especially boys, get an opportunity to do.
Wow.
Mm.
That's amazing. I mean, so you started printing, you started publishing or getting your photos published, yearbook, this, not the third. So what happens then? You go off to college, then what? Or did you even go to college?
Not initially, no. So the thing was is that, remember, this was a time when there was no internet. It was all trial and error. So
Okay.
I would put some film in the camera, and I'd try and find a few dollars to buy a magazine, and I'd photograph a bookcase. Like I'd get you've got stuff on your bookcase behind. I'd get behind along the long end of mine, and I'd adjust the settings. I'd adjust the f-stop. How much depth of field, where the
Mm.
focus was. I'd write all that down, and then I'd develop the film, put it in to get developed, and then I'd look at it and go, that's what it does at this distance, and that's what it does at this distance, or there was enough light, or there wasn't
Okay.
enough light. I just kept trial and error, trial and error.
Yeah, it's
And
correct. Wait, I gotta say something.
yeah,
So, okay, I'm getting it now because I'm thinking, yeah, back then, yeah, we forget these things. Back then, you're snapping, but you don't know what the heck you're getting
no,
until you.
no idea, no idea,
Oh my
no
God.
idea. Is it in focus? Is it shaky? Is it this? Is it
Right.
that? And of
Oh,
course, part of the passion for it is that you had to be willing to go out and deliver those crappy papers on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, so you could earn a few dollars to put a roll of film in to get it developed. Because Mum and Dad didn't have the money. My
yeah.
parents, there was myself and my brothers. My parents worked very hard, but there was just no spare cash for me to have that hobby. And so, as much as I'm sure they paid for some film here and there, but I had to have that passion myself. And so I'd get the film back and I'd look at it, and I very quickly became fixated on my compositions in the photos that I was seeing. And was the light right, and was it this, and was it that, and was I telling the story that I hoped to tell? And one of the great things about learning photography that way is that you learn to read the light. You learn to understand the mathematics of it. So for anyone watching who's into photography, if you don't know what the exposure triangle is, you need to learn it, and you can Google it. It's not that complicated, but it is a little bit of mathematics, and it's how the aperture that lets the light in affects the shutter speed, how fast it opens and closes, and how sensitive your sensor is in your phone, in your camera, and or the film in my case when I started out. And those three things combined make a perfectly exposed picture, hopefully. And so, I had to learn that math, and I'd look at things, I'd look at all of these scenes, and then I'd have to work out in my head, do I want this style? Do I want this setting? Do I want this setting? Do I want this combination? And if it didn't work, next time I go, wow, that didn't work. And it was just like that slow, it was like evolution in biology, sped
Yeah.
up over billions of years. And the benefit for me now is that, and I'm going to knock on wood here, you can probably hear me knocking, because I don't want to jinx the god of photography. But, what ended up happening was that over my career, I learned to read light. That's my gift. Okay, hopefully I'm great at composition, but I can go anywhere and my brain tells me the math. It's like if I've got
Wow.
this lens on it, this zoom or this length, or could be a
So you
super
can
wide
look
lens
at
or
the
a very
light.
close.
You can look at the light, and it's like you compute it, and you can figure out
Yeah,
which lens. All like that's
yeah.
amazing. So
So now it makes me
wow.
faster in the field, because
Yeah.
like if I'm looking at a lion or if I'm looking at a glacier in Antarctica or whatever the case is, I can set my sensitivity, my ISO on my camera, and then I know that if I want this much in focus, this much depth of field, the math's going to be about this. Or if it gives me one number, I know how that number impacts on every other part of the picture. I don't know how my brain does it, but it means that when I'm photographing, the mood of my pictures, and this is what a lot of people don't remember when they want to tell stories with pictures, is it's the mood, it's how you treat the light, that helps convey the emotion in a picture. Do I want it bright and sunny? Do I want it dark? Do I want the cracks in the eyes to be, really deep, deep blue, or do I want them to be snow white? That because I don't manipulate my pictures in Photoshop or anything, so I have to do this at the time of capture. I'm old school, and that math in my head that never shuts up. It's like that. It's like cool. It's like this compositional thing. I mean, I'm looking at you. I could shoot your scene 20 different ways. I'd be dissecting your face. I'd be doing this. I'd be doing, because all I see is compositions, and then I see the math to go with those compositions. But that's a lifetime of work.
And you said you don't do anything in Photoshop. You don't manipulate.
No, no. So for me, I never. So I am in and out of my post production in 17 seconds for a frame, like 17 seconds. I don't know how to do layers. I don't know how to do dodging and burning. I don't know how to do any of that stuff. Believe it or not, God's my witness. I don't know how to do that. I've had an assistant for decades at different times. They had all those skills, and I didn't let them do it, because for me, all I want when we do a post production on a picture, for the photographers out there, it's called a black and white point. Where you hold the option key down and you do two sliders, so it shows you where your pixels are in Photoshop, and that means that you're losing data or you've got data to go to press, because everything I do is normally going to press. So I do that. I make sure there's no color shift in the pictures, and then I do a little bit of a curve. Bang, I am out of there. I am onto the next picture. So if I'm
Wow.
not doing it, yeah, I am done, man. I am done. And that's the files that I send to Nat Geo. Now, National Geographic, if they want to put something in one of those big glossy books that you see, or the
Yeah.
magazine or whatever, they'll take that raw file, or they'll take my file, which is almost basically a raw file. And if they have to do any density changes or whatever for their printer, for their
Yeah.
machine, okay, they can do that. But what I give them is the raw, or I give them the basic processed raw file. Now, catch 22 with social media is that when I do my stuff, it looks so much less than everyone else's. Because people are beating the living daylights out of their files,
Yeah.
beating the living daylights out of it. And I get it, and I have no problem with it. Just don't tell me that's what you saw, because it's crap. That's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
crap. I'm
Oh
not
my
saying I've seen
God.
every lighting condition on the planet, but I've been on the road for 40 years. I can absolutely guarantee you. I'm still surprised, but I know when someone's, I don't know if we're allowed to swear, but I know if someone's bullshitting, that's,
Yeah.
as we would say in Australia. Apologies for anyone who I've just offended by using that phrase,
Nah, you
but
good.
yeah, but it's one of those things that, it's but also too, why do I want to do that? I mean, if someone buys a piece of fine art of mine, like a piece of my work to go on a wall, they're either going to want it the way I've put it out there, or they're going to want it to be treated like a piece of fine art, turned into monochrome or whatever. That's
Right.
cool. That's a completely different thing. No issue with that at all. It's like, do it, knock yourself out, do as much as you want, or because that's the purpose of how you're reproducing that shot. But for someone who works for Geographic and someone whose work goes into hundreds and hundreds of books and magazines and everything, where they're teaching kids about science or about nature, or yourself, National Geographic Kids that you mentioned before, the pictures need to be accurate. They don't want to look like Instagram, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty old school like that. Yeah.
Wow. How was the transition for you from film to digital when that whole
Yeah, yeah,
how,
great
how,
question. Great question, man. It was rocky. I mean, it was rocky because um, I just didn't want to transition. I still shoot film on every assignment now. I still take a film camera with me,
okay.
panoramic camera that shoots those big wide panoramics, because I love film. The photographer you are on film is the photographer you are, because digital's so forgiving. But I love digital. Digital's amazing, but Kodak, everyone's manufacturing again. Nikon and Canon are making film cameras again. It's like,
Oh wow.
it's huge. Huge. Film is huge. It's like vinyl. It's like
Mm,
vinyl. It's all back, because also, too, people want to slow down that creative process,
yeah.
take less shots, all of that kind of thing. But for me, I think I was concerned initially that I would shoot too much, and also, too, people wouldn't believe the shots that I took because digital can be manipulated so easily.
Yeah.
But I think I just fought the good fight, I think, to be honest, mate. I think for me, it was just one of those scenarios where it was like, well, I'm going to shoot digital like I shot film. You always end up shooting more. Digital's not necessarily cheaper than film because you shoot more and that requires more time and things like
Right.
that. Um, but I also sort of thought to myself, well, don't change your mantra. Don't tell the stories that don't change the story you want to tell. But also, too, I'm happy to show anyone the raw file. I shoot in raw. I'm happy to show anyone my negatives, my transparencies, my color transparencies, my digital raw files. I mean, I'm the only one at Geographic apparently willing to do that,
Right.
which makes me go, "What are you guys doing to your pictures?" But anyway, that's a fight I don't need to pick. But it was also one of the things cool. So when I finished high school, 3 months after I finished high school, I got offered a job as a zookeeper at Melbourne Zoo. So Melbourne Zoo is the second oldest zoo in the world to London. London Zoo is the oldest zoo in the world.
Mm,
Now, I started out, first 6 months I worked with native mammals, koalas, kangaroos, wombats, all those marsupials, these Australian animals with pouches. And then I moved on to carnivores and I worked with bears and meerkats and everything, eventually becoming the big cat keeper at the zoo and worked with lots of species of big cats. I did that for about 8.5 years, and then I moved across to primates, where I did gorillas, orangutans, treetop primates, and everything for another 4 years. And it was during that time, to your earlier question, where I did my studies. So my studies were not in photography; they were in applied science and animal sciences. So I
mm,
did 3 different courses whilst in the zoo. They liked us to study, so they gave me the time to do that. I still had a full-time job, but I actually went off and studied animal sciences, not only because it helped with the zookeeper role, but the money I was earning from the zoo was funding my travel. Suddenly I had money. You know what it's like. You get a job,
yeah.
you know, you're starting to go out and try and date or meet someone or spend money on a drink or two,
Right.
pizza, whatever the case might be, go dancing, go to a club or something. And I was no different. But for me, I was actually pretty focused. And the zoo used to always get these phone calls from publishing houses. And they'd call up and say, do you have a picture of a wolf or a gorilla or whatever? And so reception at the zoo would say, look, we don't have an archive, but this young guy here at the zoo always seems to have his camera. He takes pictures, people buy his pictures, here's his number. And so I started to get calls from these companies saying, do you have a green tree frog? Do you have a bear swimming? Do you have this, whatever? If I couldn't shoot it in the zoo, I would go out and try and shoot it on my weekends or my days off. And so I was, when I think about it now, cool, it's like, I was relentless, man. Relentless. I mean,
Not
I know I
quite
didn't
yet.
take a day. I didn't take a day off in 10 years. Did not take a day off in 10 years. And I built an
Jeez.
agency. I built a stock agency. So I spent 6 months of my salary on a copyright lawyer. Literally hired a copyright lawyer, spent 6 months of my annual salary because lawyers are expensive. And
Yes.
he devised a really good contract. I registered a business called Bioimages, and then all the work that I shot that went out into books and magazines went out with Jason Edwards Bioimages, because there was no internet, there was no Instagram, there was nothing to get your name
Yeah.
out. And that's how my name started to get into the market. I was hardcore. I was so hardcore about getting my name in press that if people didn't publish my name, I billed them 100% of the original invoice. So if they paid me $100 and then they didn't print my name, I billed them another 100, and that was in the contract. And my name got my name got out there, and eventually magazines started calling up and saying, "Can you go and shoot this for me?" And you'd get a 2-hour job. If that worked well, maybe they'd call you back and you'd get a 4-hour job. If that went well, maybe you'd get a single day assignment, and then 2 days, 3 days. Right. So there's no fast route. It was me proving myself all the time. But of course, I had a full-time job at the zoo. I was doing 3 different degrees at different times, and I was running a stock agency for photographic images. Sleep was like, people go, "How did you get where you are?" Well, I got up at 4. I got up at 6, did 2 hours of work, went to the zoo. Every morning coffee break, every lunchtime, every afternoon coffee break, I worked on the business. I went home, worked on the business for a couple of hours, and had dinner with my girlfriend, watched the X-Files. She went to bed. I started working till 2, 3 in the morning, get a couple of hours sleep, get up at 6, start working on the business again. So I did that for 10 or 12 years before I left the zoo, because I was determined to have a life based around creating imagery. And that money that bioimages made me, and the money that I made from the zoo, helped buy equipment, just cheap lenses or whatever I could afford at the time. Yeah. Cheap airline tickets for me to fly somewhere. There was no one. I didn't have mum and dad money. I didn't have anything. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Some people have it, some people don't. Yeah. But if I wanted to go to Africa or Asia or South America, I had to save until I bought that air ticket. And then I'd disappear with a few $100 in my pocket and a bag full of film, and I'd disappear and try and see what I could photograph. And then I'd come back and get it developed. I didn't know what I was even getting at the time. It was an interesting path.
Wow. So when did National Geographic come knocking? How did they discover your work?
I woke up after a lobotomy at one point, and then I was in Washington. No, that's not true. So basically what happened was that eventually it did all become too much. I finished my degrees, but I had some long-term relationships that did not survive that lifestyle for obvious reasons. There was no mobile phones. I'd disappear for 3 months at a time. I could have been living around the corner from my girlfriend, and if I didn't bump into her, she didn't know I wasn't in Namibia, or in Peru or whatever.
God.
So that's tough on people that you're in a relationship with.
Yeah.
But once I finished at the zoo, it just got too much, and I said to my bosses, "Look, it's time." And they weren't happy that I was leaving. I had a lot of friends there, still do. But a couple of years later, I thought, I might ring National Geographic. Maybe I'm ready. By that point, I'd been working for Australian Geographic. I'd done stuff for BBC. People had been using my work in lots of different magazines and books all over the world. So I thought, maybe I should call. I mean, I never believed in myself enough to be, National Geographic worthy, but it wasn't one of those things where I went 10 years from now, I'm going to be at Geographic. That's just not how my path went.
Yeah.
So I rang. I literally rang reception at National Geographic and said, "Can I speak to someone at the magazine about wildlife photography?" Literally, that's what I did. And they put me on hold, took my name, put me on hold, and then the lady that answered the phone turned out to be the director of wildlife photography at the magazine, at National Geographic Magazine. And her opening line was, "We've been waiting for you to call."
Are you serious?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%.
So they already knew who you were and everything.
Because they'd been watching me. They'd been vetting me from afar. That's the thing now. Everyone thinks that, digital's so instantaneous, and people do all this work to their pictures and they go, "This should be in Nat Geo." But National Geographic doesn't care about your post-production skills. They only want to see the raw file. So if your raw file's not good, they don't care. Anyone can do post-production. Can you get a good raw file? Or do you still shoot on film? Can you get a good transparency? So she said, "What's your story idea?" I gave them an idea that I had, send us some pictures. So I sent them the slides, the color transparencies, remember? The put on projection?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I sent them to Washington. They said, "Great, go and shoot some more." So I self-funded another probably 3 or 4 shoots on that story idea, sent that film across. And then they said, "Look, it doesn't fit our publishing schedule, but can we use some of it in the magazine?" And I sort of said, "Yeah." So they because they have a publishing schedule that works, a couple of years in advance.
Yeah.
So they broke it up, used it in the magazine, and then invited me to Washington to meet people, to have a chat with people, and asked me to bring 150 frames that told the story of my career. So I, a young kid, I picked out 150 frames of pictures that meant something to me, and some of them had been published a lot, others no one had liked or didn't understand, and I went off to Washington and funded the trip there myself, funded everything myself. There's no easy way around that, and again, Zoom money, selling pictures, things like that, and presented those images 44 times in 10 days to different bosses around the society and editors and different departments and kids, National Geographic kids. I met with them, I met with
Yeah.
everyone. And at the end of those 10 days, they offered me a contract. And that was 25 years ago this year. Literally, here's a fun fact for you, man. Yeah, 25 years ago, can you believe it? But here's a fun fact for you, man. That magazine, that it featured my first work, came out the weekend that I got married to my wife.
Wow.
Right?
That's amazing.
And my wedding anniversary is on St. Patrick's Day. So my Nat Geo anniversary of my first picture coming onto the shelves in the magazine is on March 17th. So that's like, what's that? That's it's the 5th today. Less than 2 weeks from now. That'll be 25 years since the magazine came up. So it's
Man,
crazy, hey?
that's,
Thank you.
that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. What a story,
And
man.
yeah, it's not the it's not
Jeez.
the usual part.
So,
It's not the
so,
usual part.
so to this day, you're still a contract worker? Are you considered a staffer, or are you considered freelance?
It's a bit. My contract's a little bit unusual. So in that they don't have the writers and the photographers where we're not contracted as staff. They don't have staff in the building like that. But for me, the way mine works is my contract. They're like my agent, for lack of a better description. They put me on assignment. They fund my travel. They the TV work that I do for them and all of that kind of stuff. They organise that. They represent the work, or and a percentage of the work that I do, because they don't keep all of it, of course, in the archives. So and of course, over the years, over that 25 years, the amount of work that I do in a year for Geographic increased as time went by. Which is what you would hope.
Right.
And I don't think I've worked for another client. I don't think I've had time to work for another client probably in at least 15 years, 10 or 15 years. So they fill my years, and
Great
and
relationship.
I travel the world. Yeah, thank you. And so that and it's National Geographic, man. I mean, we're the oldest, most respected society on the planet, and
Yeah.
we make a difference. And so I love the fact that I can travel the world on behalf of them and get to see just the coolest stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating what I get to see. It's hard to get my head around it sometimes, the
And
opportunities.
all the things that you've seen, and I know you said you 70 countries, you've been
Yeah,
chased, bitten, shot at. I read you got incarcerated. Like,
yeah,
out of
yeah.
all these
That was
things, what's the one thing that sticks out the most to you? Like, what is the most amazing or mind blowing thing that you've seen or experienced?
wow. That's a tough, man. That is a tough question.
I
It's
know.
Look, I mean, a couple of things. One, I'll come back to an image in a second, but probably the thing that I would be not surprised by, but humbled by, is just how wonderful humanity is. Now my early part of my career, I would not take a single picture of a human. Not that I hated people, but I was just so wildlife focused. I was a zookeeper. My
Yeah.
degrees were in animal sciences. Everything I was shooting was um, was based on wildlife and conservation. They were the stories that I was getting. But then all of a sudden, you go to India to do tigers, and there's 1.2 billion people there, and culture and faith and colours and everything. How can you not photograph that? And then
Yeah.
next thing you know, you go somewhere else, and over time, that interest in shooting the human condition grew for me. So I guess the thing that I'm most humbled by is the fact that in all of my travels, I'm a glasses 3/4 full kind of guy. I have hardships in my life and struggles and terrible things happen in my circles, like everyone else.
Right.
But people are amazing. People are amazing, cool. It's like they're so giving and so generous, and even if they're not, even if they're struggling, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily filled with hate and vengeance or the lack of understanding generated by the world's media for different faiths is the thing that breaks my heart, because I get to work in them all: Hindu, Christian, Judaism, Buddhism, Maoism, Taoism. I've had those opportunities. Islam is staggering. It is a staggering faith. Nothing like the West portrays it. It's just,
Yeah.
it's
It's sad.
humbling
It's
how,
sad. It is so sad how all this
yeah,
fabricated news is out there, and it just
yeah,
warps people's minds about how other cultures are, how people are. Like even with
yeah,
the little bit of traveling I've done over in Europe and the West Indies and all
yep,
that type of stuff, like I genuinely got the sense of people just want to be happy. They want to feel safe. They want to feel
right.
secure. They want to feel loved,
Mm,
right? And they just want
that's it.
peace.
Yeah. And I mean, and these emotions are not unusual for us. I mean, because putting the biologist hat on, what drives migration of any species? So take humans into the equation, we're just another species. It's safety, the ability to reproduce, and food. That's what drives migration. So if a herd of animals runs out of grass, they move to the next area and so on and so forth. Humans and our ancestors were no different. That's just what we did. That's what we do now. This whole thing about illegal immigrants and everything. Well, no, humans have always migrated. Your country, my country. The whole world was devoid of humanity, and we've evolved and we've moved through these areas. And I've found, that wherever I go, people are so welcoming and so lovely. And admittedly, I've been in terrible situations where people have tried to kill me, and okay, thankfully that hasn't succeeded. Again,
Oh my
knocking on the wood.
goodness. While you were in the
But
field working?
yeah, people have shot at me and all of that kind of stuff, and but it can get pretty violent sometimes. But inherently speaking, the world is amazing, and so if I look at my prism through that, if I look at my prism through that, my life through that prism, then, and back to your question, it's how do I stay on the road so long? Well, I stay on the road by finding everyone and everything interesting. So it's a conscious decision that I have to have, because I don't want to leave my wife and son. I love to travel and everything like that, but I love my wife, I love my son.
All right.
It's hard to continually get on the road, and I have to be better or different every frame, better or different, better or different, better or different. 20 hours a day, 365 days a year, no weekends. Like when I'm in the field, people should understand it's work. I love it. I get these opportunities, but it is work. I'm up at 4 or 4:30. If I don't go to bed, I don't go to bed for sometimes 2 days, 3 days at a time. I shoot,
How,
shoot, shoot, shoot. Every frame has to be better or different than I've done before, or the stories we need to tell. I'm lugging in pound. My standard day pack's probably 60, 70 pound easily. 70, 60, 70 pound. That's just my day pack, and then I've got all the cameras, and there's no excuses. Make pictures, not excuses. That's the motto. So I do that, and then I witness these staggeringly beautiful things. I mean, there's a picture in my book of this giraffe, and it's in amongst the wildebeest herd. Now, I shot that photo in 1992 on the last afternoon of a 3-month assignment that I self-funded. And wildebeest have been crossing the river, the Mara River, into Kenya. Crocodiles have been grabbing them. Lions have been grabbing them. It was just all biblical. It was just biblical.
and you're
And, I'm
witnessing all
pushing
of
the
that?
four-wheel drive. Pardon?
And you're witnessing all of that. These
All
lions
of it, just
grabbing
sitting
them.
there. I'm a kid. I'm probably 19 or
I
something like
think
that.
I
But
saw that photo somewhere too, maybe on your website.
it could be, and it's been used a lot. But I'm sitting there watching this. I'm pushing the four-wheel drive along quietly because we didn't want to disturb them. My friend from New Zealand, who's a wildlife artist, he's just staring at, and I look to my left and I go, "Hey man, there's a lioness out here," and he goes, "Oh, you're thinking I'm joking?" She's walking right next to me, literally right next to me, using the four-wheel drive as shelter so she can get closer to the herds. Right, and as she got ahead of me, because I'm pushing a four-wheel drive, she's not. You know, my mate sees her walk past and goes, "Man, there's a lion there." And I went, "I just told you there's a lion there." But, you know, so we
Oh
watch all of this unfold, and then the
God.
herd, you know, the herd fractures, right? So the herd stops crossing the river. And then this single giraffe comes out of nowhere. Now the sky is an ashen lead color because the short rains are there, so there's a big rainstorm there. The sun's behind me, it illuminates the herd, and this single giraffe walks across, and I take this frame. I only took two frames, one with it on the left, one with it on the right, and it just happened to hit this rise in the ground. So giraffes are tall anyway, but it must have been an old extinct termite mound or something.
Yeah.
So it gets a little bit taller. But it, you know, so it looks like the giraffes are only up to what people think are giraffes' knees, but they're not. That's technically their ankle, but that doesn't matter. So these wildebeest suddenly look even shorter than they are compared to a giraffe, and the light is biblical, and the universe is singing, and you know, and that one frame, when I look at it, you know, I go straight back to that moment. To your point about the question about, you know, this one moment, I've had many such moments, but that particular assignment was the one that changed my life. You know, because I realized on that assignment, and especially that afternoon, that this is who I wanted. You know, this is the person I wanted to be. This is me being happy. This is me being at peace in myself and the whirlwind of my over academic brain and all of those sorts of things. And it was like, you know, the in those moments when I get them, cool, I'm fortunate to have them. You have to listen, but you know, when I hear the universe singing sometimes, and I can use my craft to make a poor representation of that song, even if people think it's amazing. You know, you can never do it justice, but you know, when I feel connected to the universe in those moments, that's a blessing. That's the those moments that you refer to where I go, wow, no matter for all the struggle and the pain and the diseases and everything like that, you know, it's, you know, I feel in touch with something larger than myself, and I hope the picture does it justice to share that with people who don't have that opportunity.
No, that picture's amazing. I think I did. I just saw that on your website. And that really
Yeah,
stuck out. Either on Instagram, one of the two. But yeah, that picture is amazing. Now I
yeah.
got a question. Were you like you weren't in like a safari jeep where the lioness could have just jumped in there, right? Or were you in?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I work in. I'm out. Sometimes I'm out of the jeep working with lions and stuff like that. So, yeah, for sure.
What?
Yeah, I've slept in trees with lions. I've slept under trees with lions. You know, it's I've been lucky so far, maybe, but
Wait,
no,
wait,
I've
wait, wait,
yeah,
wait, 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 wait. Hold on. You slept in the tree with the lion?
yeah. So a mate of mine and I, my sister and I, we were in Botswana, and we found this tiny little water hole, and it was the height of the dry season, so super hot. And there was this tree that probably only it had a little forking branch that came off the trunk over the water, and it would have been maybe 8 feet off the ground, you know, 10 feet maybe. And so I found a couple of pieces of timber that we had. We just laid them across the fork, and we just walked up. We didn't have to climb. We didn't have to grapple, and so we were there to see what came in underneath the moonlight. And 22 lions came in underneath us in the and rolled around in the dust underneath us, literally 2-3 meters underneath us. And they looked up like we're above them, you know, 8-10 feet above them. And they could have just walked up. I walked up, and if a human can walk up a tree branch, a lion can walk up a tree branch. And but they had big fat bellies. They were all panting in the heat. They must have had a kill off in the bush somewhere.
Yeah.
And so they were there for hours. And in the end, you know, my mate and I, we just fell asleep with the lions underneath us in the thing, and woke up in the morning. I opened my eyes and went, well, that was a bit silly falling asleep. Looked across to make sure my mate was still there, you know, just in
Oh
case they'd
my
taken him.
God.
Um,
Like,
but,
did
you
you
know,
did you
yeah,
have a weapon or anything?
no, nothing. Yeah. I've spent a lot of time in the
What?
bush without weapons. Yeah. You know, it's Aussies, man. We don't have any guns, remember? It's not part of our culture. You know, no
So,
one owns a gun in this
wait, wait, wait. No, no, no.
country.
So, so if they were hungry, I probably wouldn't be talking to you right now.
No, it probably wouldn't be. But I mean, you know, look, I've been chased by lions and hippos, and I was out shooting them one night on the savannah, sitting on the grass in the darkness. And then, you know, my mate had the spotlight on him, and one of the males realised I was there, so I had to sprint, and he's chasing after me, and you know, jumping in the four-wheel drive and stuff, you know. But it's, you know, I mean, the thing to keep in mind is what is that line that they always say? Kids don't do this at home. The one thing to keep in mind is that I grew up in working with snakes and wildlife, and then I had a career
Yeah.
of a dozen years working hands-on every day with wildlife, including dangerous animals and elephants and big cats and all of that kind of stuff. And then I did 3 degrees of animal sciences, and it doesn't mean things can go wrong. And then I've had
Jesus.
been in the field for more than 30 years, so, and again, it doesn't mean things can't go wrong. So I don't want you to play this interview back going, we told him he was going to do something stupid, but my knowledge base and my reading of wildlife is probably a little bit different than the average person. So you can make an educated guess and it can go wrong, or you can make an educated guess and it can go right. You just don't know, you know. But
So
sometimes it's gone terribly wrong. Sometimes it's gone messy, very messy.
so what's
And
the worst
I
situation you've been in? I would think the lions, but thank God they were
no,
full.
yeah. I mean, the one that was chasing me wasn't full. He was pretty thin. But I mean, I think probably, the stuff where you have the level of control and control in italics, um, goes sideways and diminishes rapidly with things like hippopotamus, because hippopotamus are so psychotic. They're so territorial. They
Hmm.
kill more people than any other animals in Africa, in the whole continent. And
Really?
yeah, hippos kill more animals than anything, more than big cats, because people stumble across. They come out of the water at night to graze on the grass. That's where they feed at night, and so they come across people in villages, or they see people in dugout canoes or whatever, and they just hate people. It's just not just they hate everyone. They're just angry cows. They hate each other. They're always fighting over
Right.
something. And so one night the sun went down a bit quick on myself and my friend. We were in a little dugout canoe with big long lenses doing water birds at sunset, and these hippos chased us and hunted us down, and we wound up in a reed bed. Um, and they were trying to smash their way in for hours, and we just had to sit there and hide it out in the darkness, feeding the mosquitoes, feeding the leeches, and every time we tried to get out of the reed bed to go back to the village, they'd be there trying to munch the canoe. And so that was a long trip back
Wait,
that
wait.
night. And
Where were you hiding at?
we're in the reeds, just sitting in this little dugout, literally a log canoe, that sits about an inch or two above the waterline. And we just sat there for hours with the hippos trying to smash their way in, trying to get us, because they just hated us so much. So, um,
Wow.
and eventually they got, after hours, every time we tried to get out, they'd come back, and then they'd go away and they'd come back. But in the end, they just went, they moved off enough for us to,
So would they
you know,
trample you or would they bite you?
yeah, both. Yeah, but in the water they bite you, and they've got those enormous, ivory incisors. Those big tusks that they have.
Yeah.
And I'll do this for the. I'm trying to see myself on camera. When they do this, they sharpen the edge like a Wiltshire knife, and they're solid. They're like this, man. They're like this, and they punch holes into humans like no tomorrow. And the sheer
Oh,
force. I mean, you've got thousands of kilograms of animal,
right.
and yeah. So basically, you go out there at night, you're in a bit of trouble. So that was an interesting night. I didn't think it was possible to sweat so much without actually doing any exercise. But it's but it's one of those. It's interesting. But it's all those little things too, that it's all those diseases that knock you around, that nearly kill you more than anything. That I've had so many diseases, serious, deadly diseases, and I've had
Goodness.
discs punched out of my neck and fingers stitched back on and arms stitched back on and broken bones and torn stomachs and
By what?
viruses and gut loads, and oh yeah, and things where I've been isolated in isolation wards with diseases and things like that. Insect larvae living behind eyeballs, and I
What?
had yeah, I had larvae living in my right ear last year in Central Africa. That was really unpleasant. That was very, very unpleasant. The fevers and the night terrors when that was happening were just shocking, man. I
Oh
couldn't.
my
The night terrors
God.
were just the pain, but also the night terrors
What
were.
what ripped off your finger?
No, no. So basically, they got crushed by things in the field and stuff like that, and then you know, both of the. I'm trying not to be. These two here both had at different times. Yeah, so
Completely
it's
off?
Yeah, completely off. Yeah, so hanging on, bones sticking out through the top,
Oh
and
goodness.
so it's, the but I have this ability to heal. Like I have this freaky ability to heal, and so I just keep getting dysentery and getting diseases, and somehow here I am,
So
drinking
what
gin at night. You know.
has any animal been successful in attacking you?
Yeah. I've been bitten and clawed a few times over the years. Quite a few snake bites over the years, but that's the Australian way. You probably shouldn't be picking stuff up if you don't want to get bitten.
Yeah.
And the, but again, this is all I've done. And so, for me, when I decided to do, when I decided every year I'd go to Washington, which is where our headquarters are, and my boss would say, where's the book? And I'd say, where's the money? And where's the book? And where's the money? And so finally, just before COVID, we being my wife and I, decided to build a team, and I sat down and wrote a list. It was a very personal list of stories that meant something to me, if that makes sense. And I wrote 40 without looking at any pictures. There was probably 40 things on the list, the things, coverages I'd done for Geographic. And then we picked, myself and the editors in my team. We picked some of those stories. I went back to my field journals, because I keep field journals, and then started drafting them up. We wrote up the first 16 stories, and then they decided to split it, because the book was going to be just like too big.
Right.
And so now the plan is to do a trilogy of these books. This is the first one that's just come out in the US, and they're stories as I saw them. So they've got field journal entries in them, and behind the scenes, and at the back of the book there's photography tips and stuff for people who want to know my process and all of that kind of thing. And it was fascinating to go back to those journals, because some of the stories might have gone for 3 weeks, but other stories, like the Serengeti story, I've been shooting that since '92. That'll be a book by itself at some point, but we wanted to put that story in there. So same with the Antarctica story, that's been going for 15 years. So that'll be a book by itself. But these stories, we still could showcase why those stories mean something to me in this first volume, and then further down the track at some point there'll be ideally a bigger book on those. But so the whole Icebergs to Iguanas, which is the title, because I shoot everything from icebergs to iguanas, but there's cultural stories, there's stories on New Guinea, and all of those headhunters up rivers, and all of these kinds of things.
You said
It's
headhunt.
been yeah, because I mean, New Guinea, man, New
He's
Guinea
talking about the
has
cannibals, right?
yeah. Well, no, they used to take the heads because of their fallen victims. So when they were in wars and stuff like that, and it's interesting because New Guinea has the most. For those people who aren't too sure where it is, it's that small island north of Australia, and that has the most number of languages of any place on Earth. And I think the count at the moment is 840 different languages on these small islands. So it's
Really?
it's yeah, it's crazy diverse, amazing. Some people on one side of a mountain don't speak the same language as the people on the other side of the mountain. It's just fascinating, and very remote, very hard to get to, but great scuba diving. And so I like telling stories, and helping people to tell their stories, because humans have been telling stories for 60,000 years. Indigenous Australians, First Nation Australians, were here 60,000 years ago, and they painted their pictures on rock art, in caves and things like that. What we do now with photography and illustration and drawing and everything like that, and computers, is actually just the continuation of that. And I think it's important for people to try and tell their stories. And mine just happened to be, by the nature of whom I work for, and my personality, maybe mine just happened to be a little bit different to most people's.
No, that's beautiful. Tell everybody where they can pick up the book.
Yeah, so the book's available now in the United States, and you can get it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the usual online platforms. You can find it at plenty. plenty of places, and good bookstores, around the country have it as well. But if you're, there's so many Americans, you guys can get this fantastic Amazon Prime delivery service and things like that. Whereas in Australia, we don't have quite that service. There's not enough of us in the country. We have it, but it's definitely not fast like the US. But yeah, definitely can get it from Barnes and Noble and Amazon and good bookstores and stuff like that. And it's a hefty tome. It's got a few pages in it, and so you can use it and do get in there and do the bicep curls. You learn to carry that camera gear, but it is a very personal journey, and what I do call it's a privilege. It's
Absolutely.
and I'm well aware of that. I'm very grateful for the opportunities that I have. I work hard at it, and it's always a challenge to stay at the top of your game or to get better at your game. So I work at that as well, but I'm very, very aware that my unusual path through life has led me through a lot of sacrifice and a lot of hardship and a lot of heartbreak, but I was committed to having something that life full of learning and adventure and meeting new people, and I'm very grateful that has become part of who I am. I think I'm lucky as that, especially as a guy. A lot of guys don't know what they want to do, and especially as teenagers.
Yeah.
Young men. And I'm very big on male mental health. I think there's a lot of things going wrong for male mental health these days. And I think for me as a young teenage man or boy when I started, knowing what I was passionate about just gave me a focus that a lot of young people don't necessarily have. And then that can continue
Absolutely.
through life.
Absolutely. You were committed, man. Like you dove right in and stuck there, and you did the work. You really
Yeah.
did the work. A lot of people can't stay consistent like that. And that's why
Yeah.
things that they want to happen don't happen, because it takes consistency. It takes no sleep for days
Yeah.
on end, right?
Yeah.
What it takes.
And also too, it's and what I and I don't say this flippantly, but I mean, okay, let's pretend I've got a modicum of skill. I must have some
Hmm.
skill, I guess. I've been doing it for a while, but the thing is too is that if you're creative, and it doesn't mean I don't just mean people who write or draw or paint or photograph or whatever, but a lot of people can be creative in their own business. You can be in business and be creative.
Yeah.
I think trying to connect with some sort of passion in what you do, and if you can't, if you're out there building brick walls and lugging bricks all day or whatever, you're not going to find a lot of passion in that. But maybe you do, because the work that you do is beautiful and it shows the craftsmanship. But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you can't have. It doesn't mean you can't photograph or do other things in your own time. It's
Correct.
I mean, of course, there'll be people who are sitting there going, "I'm shattered when I get home. What is this guy talking about?" And I duly respect that, but I'm
Yeah.
just trying to be positive and say, that if people are sitting there thinking, "Well, I'd always like to do this," or I'm nervous about showing my work, or people tell me I take really beautiful photos or whatever, and believe me, I am terrified every time one of my pictures goes up on display or someone buys a piece of my artwork. Will they like it? Will they not? There's an exhibition on and it's got my work in it, or something goes into a magazine. Are people going to hate it? Is it going to go online? Are they going to hate it? All of that stuff does not stop for someone like me. Seriously, it doesn't
Yeah,
stop.
you're
I
human.
wish it did.
Yeah, you're human.
I wish it did. Yeah, I'm human, to a point, but yeah. And, but so the thing is that if you have this interest and things like that, just bite the bullet. Go down to the local cafe or something like that, or your local library or something, and speak to someone and say, "Look, I've got a picture I really like." You don't have to have 25 images. You don't have to have some major retrospective. Just turn around and say, "Look, I've got a picture I like, and can I stick it on the wall? Can I print it and stick it on the wall?" If you want to turn around and say, "Can I make it for sale?" That's fine. If not, just show it, display it to give
Right.
people joy, and then put a caption underneath it. Michelle Green. This is, and then write something. Write 25 words or 50 words that
Right.
just says, "I really love this shot because the way the fog came through the dam, and then the God rays came through, and we were on a family weekend." It doesn't matter what it is. But people need that connection with your vision. So I ran a scholarship for Geographic for 8 years, a photography scholarship, and it was about storytelling. And so the goal I set people was, tell me the story of a place you've been to in 5 images or less. And right, each picture had to have a caption. Now, it could be the corner store, it could be your bedroom, it could be your family home, it could be a street, it could be Istanbul, it could be Greenland. It didn't have to be exotic. And I'll rebuild. I'm building a place at the moment for teaching and helping people with photography and storytelling and mental health and things like that, and I'll probably reboot the scholarship again then. That's my plan. And it just gives people a focus. Okay, can I communicate that place in 5 pictures? So if you're looking for a little bit of mathematics or you're looking for an exercise, you don't have to shoot 5. You can shoot 500, I don't care. You can shoot 5,000. But what I want you to think about as a storyteller is that what are the 5 pictures that I could pull out of, and they don't even have to be in the one weekend. You could shoot them over 10 years. Doesn't matter, but do I have 5 pictures from a place that I could show someone that shows the story, the essence of that place? And that's a really good exercise. So when I'm bouncing around the planet, sometimes with Geographic very rapidly, I'll go from Peru to Easter Island to wherever. I've still got to tell stories in those places. I don't necessarily have the 3 weeks or the 3 months that people think I have. I might have 3 hours. I might have 30 minutes. I mean, I had a flight that changed last year, and instead of me being in Jordan in the Middle East, I wound up in Malta. Now that was fantastic, but Malta's got this 2,000-year-old Medina, stone buildings, straight out of Pirates of the Caribbean. It was amazing. So then the boss calls up and says, you've got 45 minutes to shoot the Medina. And it's like, I could have spent a week there just drinking wine and waiting for the perfect shot, but I don't, it's like, or just drinking wine, maybe not taking any pictures, but, I didn't. I had 45 minutes. So I had to create a series of frames that told a story about that Medina in the time that I had. So, if you're looking for a personal project, go back and look. If you're chipping away at something, go back and see what you've got. Or if you go away for a weekend or a school camp or whatever, five is a good number. If you go to multiple locations, if you go on a holiday with your family or with your friends or whatever, and you go to Europe, as you were talking about before, cool, and you might visit multiple cities and you want to tell a story. Okay, well, here's 5 frames from Stuttgart, and here's 5 frames from Berlin, and here's 5 frames from Hamburg or something. If you're touring Germany or something, use that as a mathematic for focusing how you see the world, because that's the thing. You've got to communicate to other people who weren't there with you. That's what we're meant to do at Geographic. Bring people to those places that they're not at.
Tell me this: when you're in Antarctica, and you were there for how long? This past?
Well, I got back a couple of days ago, so I was there for 3.5 weeks this trip. Yeah.
Where do you stay? Is Antarctica populated? Like, what's in Antarctica? Where are you staying at? Where are you living?
Man, that's so funny. That's so funny with your accent. Is it populated? It's like the answer is no. It's not. It's the only non-permanently populated continent on Earth. So you're 100% right. So there's a couple of things. Sometimes, depending on where I'm working, I could be on an expedition boat. So basically, we'll have a vessel full of scientists and geologists and biologists and marine mammal experts and things like that. And we will move from one location to the next. And we'll either do work on the water or we'll do work on the land or on islands or whatever. And we'll land and get the work done. And we do that with permits. So we can be there for a couple of hours or for days, whatever the case might be. But I've also done work on the other side of the continent where I've stayed on the science bases, and then when you're on the science base, you're living on the base, and then that becomes this home away from home. But when I'm on the science base, sometimes we go out and we sleep on the sea ice. So you take a saw out, an ice saw out, and because it never rains there. Antarctica is the driest continent on Earth, even drier than Australia is the driest inhabited continent. Mm-hmm. Antarctica is the driest continent. So you go out there and then you cut these ice bricks, you just start cutting into the sea ice, and you make these bricks like building an igloo, and you make a wall around you, and then you sleep in the hole.
And does it really hold heat?
No, the hole doesn't. It's ice.
So, oh my God. So what are you in, like
So,
North Face?
but the sleeping kit and the equipment that we use when we're on the bases is amazing. And so you have this duffel swag kind of thing with multiple layers in it, and then you sleep in your clothes and everything because you're sleeping on the ice. There's nothing
Yeah,
between you and the ice, of course. But what the wall does around you is that, there could be a howling wind,
yeah,
and it's already cold. It's Antarctica. You're sleeping in an ice box, literally in an ice box. And but then what happens is that wind starts blowing, and the temperature, the wind chill factor drops exponentially. So if there's no wind, and because you're down there in the Antarctic summer, it's not in the Antarctic winter. It's pitch black and it's like minus 50, minus 70 or something.
oh,
So but in it could be minus, let's say it's -5 on a sunny day, but if that wind starts moving, it can be -20, -30, -35 because of the wind chill ripping off that ice.
yeah.
So you have to be really careful because that's the temperature that your body feels. It doesn't matter if the ambient temperature is -5. If you've got 70-kilometre-an-hour winds across that ice, it's going to be -30, and you're going to die if you're not careful. So when you're sleeping in that little open top, there's no top on it. It's an igloo. It's just a wall. You're in there like this, and the sun never goes down because it's the Antarctic summer. So you got the face mask you wear on a plane.
Mm-hmm.
You want to have one of those. Otherwise, you can't have your head inside the thing the whole time. You get asphyxiated. So basically you wear one of these night masks. So the sun is up and the
So
wind's
so let
howling
me
over the
so
top
when
of
the
you.
Eskimos when they build the igloos,
Yep.
there's no warmth in the igloo whatsoever.
Well, no, because that's a closed structure because the tops were closed. Remember.
Yeah,
So it's still made out of ice, but I think for those Inuit, you know, people that they were more permanent structures. They would do those out on hunting trips and things like that. That's my understanding. I could be wrong. Um, and so if they had oil blubber or whatever that they could burn in little candles and things like that. But I'm sure if you built something small enough and you had a group of hunters in one of those, or a family unit or something like that, and you had furs, because they didn't have the technology that we had,
yeah.
so they've got furs from polar bears and muskox or whatever, depending on which Inuit population you're talking about. They probably put roll the furs out, and things like that. I'm sure it was quite comfortable. But it's
Mm,
a lot of labour to cut all these ice blocks out. I mean, it's you
Jesus.
know, yeah, so yeah, so when I'm down there, it's dependent on what I'm doing as to where I'm sleeping. But the expedition boats, that's very comfortable, and there's a guy that makes you too much food, of course, and because your body wants to eat because it's cold, and
Yeah.
then you got to be a bit careful because you can come home about 10 pound heavier than you left, maybe more. So you got
Gee.
to carry that around. But
So
but then it depends where I stay in other things. If I'm in the Amazon, I could be camping and sleeping in huts, or thatched huts, or I could be sleeping in a
sleeping
tent
in
or in a hammock, or it
sleeping in
just
huts
depends.
with them big old snakes out there.
Yeah, well, what are you going to do? It's
How do
like,
you but how do you steer clear of those snakes though? How?
well, you can't really. I mean, you try and always keep yourself off the ground in a forest. That's always the best thing to do if you can. Sleep in a hammock or something. I mean, there's a line. I think it's in my book actually, where I was sleeping just in an open thatched hut. So some bamboo poles and stuff, and I could feel something, on my chest because
Hmm.
there's full of insects. Like it's a billion insects out every night, and there's
Yeah,
no flywire screens. It's just the jungle's there, and
yeah.
the sound of insect calls is so deafening. It's like you're in a sound chamber, and I could
Oh
feel
my.
this thing on my chest, and I'm going. That has got to be a big spider. Like, I mean, a spider larger than my hand, because you get these big spiders there. And I'm going, there's a damn spider on my chest. Don't brush it off. Don't brush it off. Because you're never going to be faster, and they can see in the dark. So the
Yeah.
last thing you want to do is this and get a really nasty spider bite. And so anyway, I reached across and found a torch. And when I put it back onto my chest, it was it was like a lizard, like a gecko hunting
Yeah.
on my chest. and all of the insects that were coming to drink my blood, he was running backwards and forwards,
Oh, you
eating.
wow.
I was the hunting ground. I was the savannah. And so basically he was running all over me because all these blood-sucking insects were coming to me because of the CO2 I was expelling. That's how insects find you. So he's running around eating all these
Oh
insects while
my
I'm
goodness.
and I now that once I knew it wasn't a giant spider, I just turned the light out and was so exhausted and just went, knock yourself out, buddy. It's, so, but there have been times where it has been a damn big spider, and some of those spiders can be terrifyingly big. But that's nature. Nature abhors a vacuum. So every niche in every food chain is filled by one thing or another. When we come into these areas as humans, we're coming from this perfectly preserved environment that we live in,
Right.
but we're going back into nature, and you have to respect that. It's like crocodiles in Australia, in the top part of Australia. Crocodiles are unchanged for hundreds of millions of years, not hundreds of years, not thousands of years, hundreds of millions of years. And the only thing that changed basically in crocodile design is that they used to be much bigger because their prey was much bigger. So they fed on dinosaurs, so they had to be big. Then as their
Right.
prey base changed, as evolution changes and dinosaurs shrunk and things like that, then crocodiles still shrunk. But our crocodiles, like Nile crocodiles in Africa, they're big, man, and they eat people. That's the bottom line. It's not urban myth. We are just a food source. So you don't go swimming in these muddy rivers up in the top part of Australia and swimming in billabongs and lagoons and things like that and expecting to come out, because they're the best ambush predators on the planet. They've been doing it for hundreds of millions of years. You can't look in the water and go, there's no crocodile there. How would you even know?
Right.
Because they're really good at what they do.
Yeah.
So if you go swimming in a seal colony, there's probably going to be a shark. You go swimming in the water, there's probably going to be a croc. So you have to do your best to mitigate any potential survival mishaps if you
Ha-
can, I guess. But
Has there ever been a expedition that you felt was too dangerous and that you backed out of, or you just
no, there's no, not definitely not. I mean, there's so many that have gone sideways with, you're on the road and you're changing countries, and all of a sudden a country collapses and people. I had one episode once where I didn't even know which country I was in Central Africa. I went up a lake and the villagers were stoning myself and my friend with rocks like it was just trying to stone us to death, and we ran off into the bush, and the paramilitary picked us up and locked us up in prison in Central Africa, this frigging military prison base or something, put us in prison, and
why?
and then took, well, because what are two white guys doing in the middle of a paramilitary area with a bunch of camera gear, in Central Africa?
Okay.
Obviously, they don't necessarily think that we're doing the right thing. And then they dumped us off at these drug runners, this cartel house by the time it's a much longer story, but by the time we got to the capital in a different country, they had a meningitis epidemic, and the whole thing fell apart. And 30,000 people were killing each other with machetes, and you just can't see any of that coming. It's like you don't even know where you
Wait,
are.
wait, wait, hold on, wait. They had a meningitis epidemic, and then 30,000 people were killing each other. Wow.
Yeah, so we get into this country. We get to live with the drug. They do a drug run, and so where they put us in the back of this utility vehicle and drove us for like 8 or 12 hours or something, and kicked us out in this city. And so we were in this city, and we went, wow, we just found a cheap room, and Central African city, so it's just chaos anyway. And but there was I said to my friend, what's going on here? And we met a student there from the university, and he said just there was thousands of people dying from meningitis, just this epidemic of meningitis. And the government, this had been going on for months though. This isn't just because we got there.
Right.
We came right in at the pointy end of the wedge, and the government was losing control. The security forces were trying to crack down on the population, and the population wasn't having a bar of it. And then the government brought out the military, and I just sort of said to my friend, we have got to get out of here. And so I went to an Air Force base and bartered us onto a plane. And I said, this city's going to go down. And it just had that feeling, all my experience, I went, this is not going to end well. And yeah, and basically we managed to get out of there on this plane that wouldn't work. You know, they couldn't get the engines to work on this plane. So after about an hour and a half of flicking switches and everything, they pushed it back to the hangar. And then when they were in the hangar, the pilot just started bashing on the console, and all the red lights went out. And he turned around and he went, "What do you want to do?" And I went. So he turned around. They spun the plane around in the hangar, and he put the throttle down. And as we took off, I said to my mate, you know, no one even knows what country we're in. We only just found out what country we're in. If this plane goes down, they will never find our remains. We will just be disappeared for gone. But basically, we got out of there, and then about a day and a half later, it all fell apart, and the whole city erupted in violence. And it was one of those things where tens of thousands of people were, you know, macheting each other, and there was so many thousands of deaths, and it was all very terrible. And we kept
Because
in
of the
contact with
meningitis, or because it was kind of like
just and this is the thing. This is what happens, Cool. You know, it's a combination of events. It could be internal divides between communities. People are scared because people are dying from disease, and then they don't believe the government has their back, or they're not supporting them. They're impoverished. Education is low. Um, people. Education is the key to success for all economies. You know, I mean, it's yours, mine. You know, when people are uneducated, they will believe whatever someone tells them on a TV, on a radio, on a whatever. You know, and you know, we see it now in the world's media, and so people in our countries do whatever they're going to do with their vote, or, you know, with their rights, or whatever they think they're going to do. But it's no different anywhere else in the world. And so, you know, if you've got a starving population that feel disenfranchised, who are scared of disease, who are dying from disease, with an upper echelon of government that seem to have all the power and all the money, and then there's all that corruption that goes with it, eventually that bubble's going to go.
Yep.
And, you know, the same thing happened in Rwanda, you know, with the Hutus and the Tutsis, you know, and people look at Africa and they sort of, and other parts of the world, and they say, oh, it's only because it's Africa. It's not. I mean, you know, without being too political, look at January 6th. It's exactly the same. Exactly the same. You know, I mean, you know, the holiest of holy in that part of your government was destroyed, you know, ransacked. Yep. Now, people will be sitting there going, you know, you have no right to have an opinion. Well, I do. I'm a citizen of Earth. But in my humble opinion, that was terrible. It was I'm being very diplomatic here, but other people thought that they were doing the right thing, and so that mindset that people can have will manifest itself in different ways around the world, and that's what I have to navigate when I travel, you know, and sometimes I can be looking at very, very beautiful things and going, wow, the universe is marvelous. And then other times I can be in bushmeat markets watching species get cut up for food and going, this is heartbreaking, and I'm crying at night. Or I see people suffering, or I see people who are doing very well. You know, my life is all over that mix for me. And so that's why I said earlier, I think, you know, that the humbling experience I've had with humanity and the generosity of spirit in my decades on the road is not more or less important than the wildlife and all of that stuff I've seen, but it's just, you know, that, you know, I've seen a lot of what humanity is capable of in both the good and the bad.
Have you ever run into cannibals?
No, well, I've worked with the headhunters in New Guinea for sure, yeah, and but I've had no one sizing me up. I've always got a bit of weight on, Cool. You know, they get a decent feed out of me, I reckon.
How do you know? How do you know that they're not preying on you while you're working with them?
Because there's no teeth marks on my arms.
Oh my goodness.
Well, you know, look, you know, that's the times when you rely on, you know, we call them fixers, you know, people that are there to help us get into and out of areas, people who might speak the dialect and things like that. Sometimes I'm by myself, and other times I have people that we know that have a certain knowledge base and things like that, and you rely on them to make judgment calls sometimes that it's time to leave, you know.
That's a lot, man. Jesus.
Yeah, And you know, the thing with modern travel though, cool, is that, you know, it's you know, you can be in these amazing different environments and then spend 40 hours getting back, or a couple of days or whatever, to get back home again. And I live in a little cottage, a little old English cottage in Melbourne, right in the city, you know, and tiny little place, and but very, you know, very. I love my area. It's great because everything's walkable here. You
Right.
know, the cafe's close, the wine shop's close, the pool is close. You know, all the things I love because I do enough miles. But I can be doing something in, you know, one part of the planet, and then a day and a half later, or
Back to
whatever,
normal.
whatever the math is, I can be back getting pizza at a restaurant and drinking a glass of wine, and it breaks your brain. You know,
I'm
like
sure.
it breaks your brain. You know, and I'll tell you, you know, tell you one of my church stories here. Cool. Let me tell you a church story. So I love all faiths. I love them all. And so our local church here, this is a number of years ago, they would set up at Christmas in the park, our local park, and they would sing, you know, they would put on songs, and all the community would come out and just gather for a barbecue, whatever, you know, great. You know, it's summer here. Our Christmas is summer, so it's always warm. I get home from the ice. So I'd been down south, and this plate of ice is the size of France, right? And there's no one down there. So I've heard nothing but wind, ice, occasional penguin, but mainly seals, right? I've barely seen a human. So I get along. My wife is over at the park. My son's playing at the park. Hundreds of people. I've lived in this area my whole life in one way or another. And anyway, so they're singing and everything, and I'm just tired. You know, I'm worn out, but the cacophony, cool, the sound of everything, you know, is just too much. But also, too, I love Christmas carols. I love a good Christmas carol. I want to go to a Christmas carol concert and hear the Christmas carols that I know, right? But these guys, you know, my parents were married in that church and everything like that. They're singing some really obscure stuff, right? Stuff that, you know, like that you would have to be in the inner sanctum to know the words, you know.
Yeah.
But of course, my brain is bursting. So out of my mouth comes, to show you the isolation versus city life, because I live right in the city. So out of my mouth comes the phrase, you know, what's going on with the church? You know, why can't they sing the greatest hits or something, right? Right at the time that they finished a song that no one knew, so people were struggling to clap. My voice echoes out across the park, right? And everyone knows it's me, you know. And my wife's there, and she looks up at me. She's sitting with some of the other mums, and she looks up at me, and they start singing again, you know. And she points at me, as only a wife can do, and she says, "Make a decision. You either stand there and shut up about whatever Christmas carol comes out of their mouths, or you go home," which is just literally only 200 meters from my house,
Right.
"and there's some wine for you in the fridge." And I thought about it. I went, you know, folks, I love you all. Merry Christmas. You know, I said, but you can't imagine the ringing in my head at the moment, you know.
Right.
And as I walked off, I heard my wife say, you know, to these other mums, you know, when he's in the field, he's a god and he should be treated like a god. But when he's home, he's just a man, right? and, and I burst out laughing as I walked home. And I don't think I should be treated like a god. That's not the point of the story. But the funny thing is that it was just at that point, my wife and my son had not been to Antarctica, which is so unlike anywhere else. Years later, they would go. And then, you know, when Megs got home, she said, "Look, I'm so sorry. I should never have asked you to come. I can't imagine what the transition was like, you know,
Yeah.
to go from."
Yeah.
And the thing was, too, it was the US Air Force that got me to that plate of ice. So they flew me on a US Air Force Hercules, dropped me on that plate of ice, picked me up on the plate of ice, and flew me back. So it's not like I had to go through international airports all over the world to get home.
Right.
And but it was just, you know, and it had nothing to do with the fact that, you know, about the church or anything. They just had a crappy playlist that year. You know, they should have had a better playlist. You
Yeah.
know, but also the timing was, you know, the timing was poor for my mind. You know, it
Yeah.
was that just the adjustment. And if I don't have big gaps between assignments, you know, then it's like, wow, I've just gone from doing the deserts of West Africa to, you know, to the ice of whatever, or the this of this, you know, that even in here, you know, it's wonderful and the adventure's wonderful and everything, but you know, it can be a lot to process, I guess, is what I'm rambling about. But
I'm
you know,
sure.
wonderful, but a lot to process. Yeah.
I'm sure. All right, so before we get out of here, I gotta
Mm.
ask one question.
Fire away.
And for you, I don't know what it's gonna be, but I always ask my guests this: what's one thing that you feel that you could be doing more of or better to get you to where you're going or to accomplish whatever else you want to accomplish in life?
Wow. Wow, that is a great question. Great question. Um, Look, if can I answer it with one thing and then a second thing?
That's fine.
Yep. Okay, cool. So my first answer is, you know, my I believe, I hope my greatest achievement and what I work the hardest at is my relationship with my son and my wife. You
Mm,
know, not because I'm away all the time, I've probably given that impression, but they get to travel with me and, you know, and things like that. And I make sure I'm home and all of those kinds of things. That's, you know, I've made sure, and I didn't even travel for when Will was young and everything, I stayed at home. So that's what I worked the hardest at. But because that's the most important thing. It's much more important than my career. But in the rest of my life, I think I need to be I need to work harder at being kinder to myself. I think what I do is quite intense, and I work hard at it. I'm not that great at business, and I should be better at business. I mean, I've ran a business for a long time, but I'm often I'm often putting tasks on myself and lists of things to do that are so overwhelmingly impossible to achieve
mm,
that when I actually get some things done, or if I wing a gong, if I win an award, or I get some amazing picture or whatever, I don't allow myself that moment to linger too long to reward myself for that success. I'm not sitting there going, you idiot," or anything like
right.
that.
Yeah. You just
But
you're on to the next. You're on to the
go
next.
on to the next, yeah. And maybe that's why I'm
You've
where I'm
become
at.
jaded. You've become jaded. That's your
Yeah,
life. So nothing is like nothing surprises you. Nothing. I mean, I'm not gonna say that nothing wows you or anything like that, but you're
yeah,
in it. That's your life. What have you not seen? So
yeah,
you. Okay, that's a great picture. You acknowledge it. On to the next. What's
yeah,
next? That's it.
yeah.
So
And
now
and
you
and
have
that's
to
the thing.
appreciate it.
Yeah. And also too, yeah, that's exactly right. And also too, you know, to wake up the next morning and do better than that, you know, and do it
Exactly.
different. You do it
Yeah.
every single day. And
Yeah.
uh, so I think, you know, the thing I need to work harder at and it's a work in progress. I'm not saying I haven't had some successes as I've gotten older
Right.
in finding that balance in my mind, but I would definitely say that is something that I am consciously trying to work better at because um, you know the I've squeezed a lot into life, you know, and I've
Yeah.
never had a day of boredom, and I
Absolutely.
don't want to feel like I don't want to get to that point where I just go, you know, enough's enough. I want to find the adventure in everything and the joy in everything. So I'm aware that I need to cut myself some slack sometimes so that I don't wind up at that position.
Give yourself some grace, man. You've done it all, but still enjoy the journey. You still got to enjoy the journey. So it just sounds like,
100%.
you enjoy what you're doing, you love what you do, but
Yeah.
you need to step back and appreciate the art that you're
Yeah.
creating.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And actually, you know, that's a really interesting point, Cool, because when I'm doing back to backs, and I've been really busy since COVID, of course, because Melbourne had the world's longest lockdown. Um, I've got shoots where I've gone through them rapidly to do the whip. We call it a whip, a work in progress. What's the overall feel? But I like going through my shoots 3 times because that creatively narrows it down each round I go through to the point where I go, wow, that's the story that I told, or that added that to the bigger story. When I don't get that process completed because I'm on another plane, I feel creatively like there's a bit of a hole in the Swiss cheese. You know, it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
wow, did I really do Iceland as well as I thought I did? I've got to
Right.
get back and look at that. You know, and it's great that I'm busy, and that's stopping me from doing that because, of course, I've got a wife, I've got a son, I've got life expenses like everyone else does. So I need to be earning money. I need to be working, but there is a need for me to this year. and it will be this year. I need to make it happen. Um, where I need to go back to some of those shoots and look at them and say, okay, what did I pull out of that? Did I
Hmm.
really tell the story, and have a glass of wine and just work my way through, especially when the colder winter months come. And
Yeah,
although I'm in Africa for much of winter this year, but with my family, so maybe it won't happen in winter, but it does need to happen, because that's the reward for the hard labor in the field.
exactly.
Did you succeed or didn't you succeed?
Yeah,
It's,
because
yeah,
think about it. When you were younger, you admired the capture, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what you got into it for. You admired the capture, so you got to get back there. And that's just like anybody,
yeah.
we lose ourselves in life, and we say to ourselves, like, man, I got to get back to when I was childlike, because that's when I was,
Mm,
things were pure. I had passion. I had joy, right? So,
yeah. And I
it's
mean, there's a line in the book where I said it more eloquently than this, but photography was probably the most selfish pastime that I could have done, because I picked a pastime that gave me joy, that enabled me to travel and do all those things. And why not? Cool, like,
right.
why not? I mean, my dad had an amazing work ethic, and it was just like, boy, I don't care what you do, just work hard at it.
Yeah,
And so I'm fortunate that I've got this job that I love. I get to create. I get to express myself through the job. And admittedly, like I just got off a 4 days travel to get back home. It's give me a
see,
couple of more days. Give me a couple more days and a couple of swims in the local pool, and I'll be going. Yeah, I'm firing. And my next assignment's Morocco, and I can't wait, because I love Morocco. But it is one of those things that I think there's an old saying. It doesn't matter if you're on the right track, if you don't keep sprinting, the train still kills you. you
yep,
know and so that's the thing for people to understand. It's like, you want to do what I do. Can you do it? Probably, possibly anyone could potentially do it, but you really have to keep moving. You
yeah,
have to be passionate. You've got to have it in here. You've
yeah,
got to have it in here. And you've got to say to yourself, I'm going to make sacrifices. It's the weekend. I've got a Monday to Friday job. I need to work on my craft on the weekend. Does that mean that I can't spend as much time with the girlfriend or the boyfriend as I want to? Does it mean I can't sleep in after a big night out? Yeah, you can't, because you've got to
right,
be out there at the golden hour taking pictures. Where's your
exactly.
passion? Get it done, and make pictures, not excuses. That's the bottom line, and then put it out there. And also too, just on the whole mental health thing, it's like, don't get caught up in likes and everything, and that's you know, I'm there, we're all there, and things like that. But if you put a picture up and someone says something nasty, who cares?
Who
It's
cares?
easy to say that. People say, yeah, but who cares? It's your
Yeah,
work. You were creative. Congratulations.
yep.
You liked what you created. Someone pulls a hole in it. Just, it happened. It will
Doesn't
not stop
matter.
happening. you know, just move forward and just say to yourself, I actually like this shot because of X, Y, and Z. I mean, we've just had 10 puppies in the house, and it's like, I put up a puppy video on social media, I get 10 times more people viewing it than I do for a shot where I sat in a tree for 5 weeks to take one frame. And
That's what
people
social
go,
media is like.
oh, people go, oh yeah, there's not much in that photo. And I'm going, do you
Yeah,
realize how hard that was?
that's what social media
But
is
I,
like.
I
I
turn around and,
promise you. For social media is so, you put your work up and it's 5 likes. You put some
yeah,
nonsense up, or you just put some random up,
yeah.
1,000 likes. You know what I mean? That's just what it is, man.
No,
So
and that's the thing, and that's why I raise it for people, because people sort of see, and I've got whole shoots from the last 12 months that haven't even gone onto my social feed or anything yet, because I haven't done those run throughs.
yeah,
But people know me, who follow me, and they turn around, they go, look, Jace will turn around with his West Papuan underwater work at some point. And, and I'm not going to pretend I just shot it then. They know I was in West Papua like 8 months ago.
right.
It's like, but it doesn't diminish the work. It just means that I just didn't have time to get around to
Yeah,
it. And but yeah, be passionate and kind to one another. That's the thing. It's that if you want to be creative, if you're running around with a lot of angst and a lot of anger, unless that's the sort of work that you want to produce, which is great. Statement pieces, whatever the case might be, power to you. Um, but depending on how you want to see the world, it's impossible to see it one way and create it differently. You know,
Yeah.
when you're creative, it definitely comes out in the work that you do, and I think that's important, and to be supportive. It's like the old "do unto others," isn't it, my friend? Do unto
Yep.
others as you do unto yourself.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing. It's a lot of fun, but but it's also one of those scenarios where um, you know try and make yourself happy. It's
Yeah.
okay to make yourself happy.
Yes, it
That's
is.
it's
Absolutely.
people will tell you that it is not, and that it's selfish,
Oh,
but
man, listen.
life, it's madness.
You
Life's
gotta make
tough.
yourself happy. You gotta
Yeah,
make yourself happy first before anybody else can make you happy.
yeah,
Gotta
yeah.
be
People
happy with
can't fill
yourself.
those holes. Yeah,
Yeah,
100%, 100%.
absolutely.
And yeah, be kind to one another. I think is one of those things, and don't believe everything you read. Don't believe everything you see, unless I'm saying it or I'm writing it. In which case,
Yeah.
that's probably
Don't
yeah.
believe everything you see with those digital photos.
No, no. Well, hey, I mean, man, I tell you, I thought of, and I'm a judge I've been a judge over the years in some pretty big competitions, and I've always thought, I'm gonna run my own competition separate to the scholarship one day, and I'm not gonna let anyone put in anything but a raw, put in
Yeah,
a raw file.
do that.
That separates the wheat from the chaff pretty damn quickly. I can tell you that much. You know,
Absolutely.
it's but yeah, and yeah, I don't know, man. That's what I do. And that's how I work, and like I said, family first, and my
Amen
wife and
to
my
that.
son. Yeah, my wife and my son have always had the opportunity to come with me in different parts of the world, which is great. And not
That's
on every
a
trip,
blessing.
of course. Yeah, my wife has a job and my son had school, but
Yeah,
we've made it happen, and so they've had a unique opportunity. My family were camping. If we two
yeah,
minute noodles and camping in the bush. My son just has a different opportunity, and he's been educated to understand the privilege of travel and things like that. But if you want to get out there and see it, just takes time. No shortcuts, no quick fixes, unless you're inventing YouTube and selling it for $2 billion or something. It's
right. Yeah,
just pocket that money away. I mentor people all the time. You want to go overseas, or you want to see this, or you want to go to the Grand Canyon, or you want to do whatever. Um, just chip away slowly at it. Don't have that extra coffee, or don't put $20 aside if you can find $20.
sacrifice,
Well, yeah,
sacrifice.
sacrifice.
That's it.
You do that every week, and you'll have an international airfare in a year.
Yep.
Then that's the hard part, getting the airfare money. Get yourself a passport. It's there's a big world out there to see, and it's wonderful and fascinating and full of color and vibrancy and love and music and some tough stuff as well. But that's life, and the all those things you've ever dreamed of. It doesn't matter what age you are. You could be 80, you could be 18, you could be 8.
Yep.
Just make a plan, get out there, and if travel is something that interests you, you can make it happen. It just slow and steady wins the race. There you go. That's enough preaching from me.
Absolutely. Well, listen, man, I appreciate you. I really appreciate this conversation. I learned a lot. I'm sure the viewers are going to learn a lot. Continue doing what you are doing and living your life's passion, because that's what you truly are doing. And so, everybody, make sure you check out Icebergs to Iguanas on Amazon. I got the link down below anyway, so I got all your links and everything. So they go check you out, man. But yes, listen, we out after many more expeditions, let's get back in touch. Let's do a follow-up interview. I would love that. Here's some
100%.
more stories, here's some more experiences, just see where you are with it. And I'll definitely be supporting you. I'm big with supporting on Instagram, so you'll see me liking your
Too
pictures.
easy.
Yeah, definitely keep in touch. So
Yeah.
I thank you,
Love
man.
love to see. Yeah, love to see you again, man. God bless, and
Yes,
thanks for having me, folks. And go hard, go well, make pictures, not excuses. Be kind to one another. Thanks,
absolutely.
buddy.
Absolutely. Everybody, you know where I'm at every Tuesday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here, kicking it with someone cool like Jason Edwards. Until next time, we are out. Peace and love, y'all. Peace and love.